Hi, I'm Dr. Hope Hodgson-King. I'm a senior clinical psychologist in Hampshire CAMHS. Welcome to this workshop, which is all about supporting yourself in order to support your child. So in today's session, we're going to be thinking about why it's really important that you look after yourself when supporting your child. We're also going to be thinking a bit about the challenges, though, when supporting yourself. And I'm going to give you a range of strategies that might help you to support yourself. And in turn, this might also support your child. Throughout, I'm going to be linking into a range of resources that will build on some of the things that we talk about today. So, when developing this workshop, I was really thinking about what I hoped you'd get out of today. I really hope that today this gives you some help and some ideas. Some ideas of how you can support yourself and really focus on parent and carer self-care. I also hope that this workshop will give you some comfort and hope. Comfort that you're not alone, and comfort that it can be challenging when supporting a child with mental health difficulties. I hope as well that this will give you hope that things can get better and some practical skills and strategies that you can use. I hope as well it will be a reminder of the strategies you already have and the skills that can be useful, but also be a reminder that looking after yourself is really important. What we won't be focusing on today is specific mental health problems for you or your child. These are covered in a range of other workshops and videos on our website. There also won't be a professional focus, as I'm very much focusing on parents and carers. I'm very aware that some parents of carers might wear different hats. They might also be a professional. I think all these strategies are really useful for parents and carers, but also useful for professionals too. So if you're a professional listening, I'd encourage you to use these strategies as well. I use all these strategies, both personally and professionally, and find them really useful. I'm really mindful that as you watch this as parents and carers, you might be at different points of your journey in thinking about your own self-care and looking after yourself when you're supporting your child. For some of you, you might already be on part of that journey to really think about how you can support yourself. But for some of you, this concept of parent self-care might feel really far away from your day-to-day life. It's absolutely fine wherever you are at part of this journey, but please do look after yourself. I'm very aware that this is an emotional and emotive topic and might bring up lots of different thoughts and feelings. So please do make sure after this you have a bit of time for yourself, and if needed, there's someone that you can have a bit of chat about what it brings up for you. So why are we talking about this? We're talking about this topic because at Hampshire CAMHS we believe that this is really important. We also believe that parents and carers are really vital to supporting their child's mental health recovery. You know your child best. The research pre-COVID showed that 1 in 10 children or young people were experiencing some form of mental health difficulty, challenges in the context of neurodiversity, or special educational need. The updated stat shows that 1 in 6 children or young people are experiencing some form of mental health difficulty, which is a significant increase. The research also shows that there is a lot less support out there for children and young people who experience mental health difficulties in the context of neurodiversity and special educational needs. And that means that there's 1 in 6 parents and carers who are currently supporting a child with such difficulties without a lot of support. Despite this fact, there's a lack of research, literature and support out there specifically focusing on parents and carers and their own well-being. That's why at Hampshire CAMHS, our campaign for 2023 and 2024 has really been focusing on parent and carer well-being. So what can it be like supporting a child with mental health difficulties? I'm going to ask you to just pause this video for a few minutes to stop and reflect on what it's felt like for you. It might also give you an opportunity to think about what you've heard from other parents or carers out there, about how they shared about what it's been like for them too. You might find it helpful to write some of these things down. I'll see you in a minute. So hopefully you've had a bit of time to think about what it can be like for you when supporting a child with mental health difficulties. You'll notice that there is a link at the bottom of this page to a video. This is a video that I think really helpfully explains some examples of how some parents and carers describe it can feel like to support a child with mental health difficulties. It's a light-hearted video based on a Pixar film, Inside Out. Some of you may have seen this already. Inside Out is all about a little girl called Riley and her family who recently moved schools into a new area. In this scene, she has just moved to a new area And in Inside Out, it follows Riley and the little emotions in her brain and how they kind of help her on her journey of growing and developing. In this particular scene, they've moved to a new area and Joy, the little emotion in her brain, has gone missing. This is the first scene where they're sitting down for dinner and her parents start to realise that something is slightly different for Riley. I'd encourage you to pause this video and put this link into your web browser and give it a watch, and be on the lookout to see if any of the things that you notice when thinking about yourself might come up in this particular video scene. See you in a minute. So this is a kind of a light-hearted video showing what it can be like to support a child with mental health difficulties, but it draws on a lot of key themes that I hear a lot from parents and carers of what their experience has been like. Firstly, supporting a child with mental health difficulties can be emotional. In the scene, you saw that everyone was experiencing a lot of different emotions, both Riley and her parents. These different emotions were making it quite lonely. It was starting to strain their relationships, and it was really difficult for them to communicate with one another effectively. Supporting a child with mental health difficulties can also be confusing, and you could see in that video that the parents were really confused by what was going on for Riley, and you can see that she was confused herself. That confusion can be very tiring, frustrating, and challenging. Lots of parents describe this as almost like a roller coaster of emotions, both for themselves but also for their child. I think this scene also shows that it can feel really de-skilling as a parent, and this can lead to feelings of shame and guilt, which are common feelings that I hear parents share. What we also saw in the video is it can impact the whole family. All the family were impacted by this scene, both mum, dad and Riley. And what we saw is it was impacting not only what they needed to do, but what they wanted to do too. So for this particular family, we saw early in the film that meal times was a really important time that they came together to connect. What we saw in the video is that actually none of them were able to eat their dinner, which is probably something they needed to do to meet their basic needs. But they also didn't get the time that they needed to connect as a family, which was often something that they wanted to do. This is something we hear a lot from parents and carers, of where supporting themselves and supporting their child can be really challenging, as it makes it really hard to meet their own basic needs, but also for the whole family to do the things that they really like to do too. Now, you may have noticed this video was quite humorous and light-hearted in the stereotypical jokes that it made, but as a parent watching this, you might have related to the mum in the scene or the dad, independent on whether you're a mum or a dad. You might have felt like the mum in the scene, who was very hypervigilant and alert, really trying to work out what was going on for their daughter. There might be times where you also relate to the dad in the scene, where you've had a difficult day and you just need to switch off and focus on other things. Both of these experiences are often reported by parents for lots of different reasons, so I encourage you to think about where you might connect to both at different times. So why does it feel like this as a parent or carer? Well, our emotions can be really helpful. Emotions are there to help us to connect to one another. We are biologically wired to be on the lookout for others' emotions so we can respond quickly and effectively. Our emotions are a really good way of us non-verbally communicating to one another very, very quickly, and this can be really helpful, particularly if there's threat or danger. Emotions can also help us to connect. We are biologically wired to feel what others feel, and this helps us to respond more appropriately to one another in the right situation. So if I was feeling really sad, it might make you start to feel really sad, and that might allow you to respond a lot more appropriately to me and give me comfort in the moment. Caregivers can also develop a strong attachment and emotional bond to their child. This continues throughout life, and it's there to help keep the child close to their caregiver to improve a child's chance of survival. This means that when your child is emotionally struggling, you will very likely struggle too. It's completely normal, but it can make it really hard and very emotionally evoking as a parent or carer. So what causes children's mental health difficulties? Often parents and carers say they can find it really hard because they're trying to really work out what has led to significant challenges for their child. Sometimes the trigger is really clear. There might be a significant adverse life event that has caused your child to be really struggling at the moment. Often, however, there are a lot of different factors that can interplay to play a part into why your child might be struggling at the moment. Genetics and temperament can play a part. So sometimes parents describe their children as always being quite cautious or always being a worrier. Children can also learn from others, but it might also be a build-up of lots of different things over time that contributes to a child struggling in that moment. It might also be that a child just hasn't developed the coping skills which will help them to manage in that moment. Often it's a combination of all these factors that play a part, and I think it's really important to say to parents and carers that we don't always need to know what has caused a mental health difficulty to be able to understand how to support a child best. We just need to know what is contributing to keeping that problem going in the moment. Other factors that can contribute to your child's mental health difficulties might be the system around your child as well. So the system around a child can impact a child's mental health, but it also can be really significant in supporting children to overcome mental health difficulties too. You'll see in this example kind of the system around the child. It's very complex. So we have the macro system, which consists of the culture, the social classes and the law, which can all impact how the child's doing. As we get closer to the child, we also have their neighbourhood, the legal system, friends and family, and the health service that all can play a part. And as we get closer, schools, peers as well can contribute as well. You'll notice that the closest thing to a child in this system is their family. And therefore, parents and carers are absolutely key to supporting children to overcome their mental health difficulties. You absolutely know your child best. However, as we touched on earlier, supporting your child with mental health difficulties can be really difficult, and you need to look after yourselves to look after them too. You may have heard this analogy before, but when you're on a plane, you're often asked to put your oxygen mask on first before you support those around you. This same analogy is the same when thinking about your own well-being. It's really important you support your own well-being before you support your child's. However, there can be lots of barriers and challenges to parent well-being. Here are a few that parents and carers have shared with me that is an understandable and very tricky barrier to supporting their own well-being. Firstly, being a parent or carer is hard in normal circumstances. There is so much to juggle as a parent and carer, to sleepless nights, having to support and juggle lots of different commitments, not only for yourself but for your child, supporting them with sickness or challenges at school. These are hard in normal circumstances, let alone when your child is struggling with mental health difficulties. As we touched on earlier, there's also a lack of recognition, space and permission for parents to acknowledge that they might be struggling. This can be really hard in the context of parental stigma, which can often lead to parents saying that they feel really scared to share that they might be struggling due to fears of judgments or blame from others into why their child might be struggling. This can further be impacted by the cultural challenges and the cultural systems around a child and family, which may impact on the beliefs of whether there's permission for parents to share how they're feeling. Parents and carers' beliefs of their own support or well-being might also shape whether they feel able to share that they're struggling. And this will be impacted by their own experiences of support and parenting as a child, and whether they saw this modelled by their parents themselves. I want to acknowledge too that there are also real challenges in the system with seeking support. I feel very proud to work for Hampshire CAMHS, but we know our wait lists are really long, and this leads to parents often saying that they feel they really need to fight for support. That fighting is a lot of energy, but it also means that there's not a lot of permission for parents to focus on themselves and the support they might need. And it can put a lot of pressure for parents to feel like they need to be the ones to support their children to recover from their mental health difficulties too. Finally, I want to acknowledge that life is busy. Parents might have their own wellbeing challenges and current challenges in life, such as work, relationship, financial challenges. And this can really also impact on being able to prioritise yourself and focus on your own well-being. What I encourage you to do today as we go through the workshop and strategies is to really notice what comes up for you today. What do you think of what I'm saying? What do you feel? And how do you respond? This might give you a real insight into what the current barriers are for you when thinking about your own well-being, and might be the first step to thinking about how you take these things forward. So what can you do to support your own well-being? Today I'm going to give you a range of very simple strategies to support you to support yourself. I want you to remember though that you already have a lot of skills, so do hold on to the things that have worked for you previously and try to think how you can bring those back into your day-to-day life. I also want to acknowledge that you might need to make some adaptations to some of the skills that I talk about today. Everyone has different circumstances and at different parts of the journey, so do think creatively about how these skills could work best for you. It's really important to highlight that these skills have to be simple to be effective. This is very much just an introduction to this topic, and there's a lot of additional resources and videos that go alongside this video that will support you to think about how you can practically implement some of the things I talk about today. So I want to start by introducing you to your window of tolerance. Some of you might have heard of the window of tolerance. The window of tolerance is your most balanced and calm state of mind. It's when you feel most relaxed and in control, you're able to function most effectively, and you're able to take on challenges life will throw at you. This is when you're most likely to parent well, and you're more likely to use your best strategies. It's when you're at your best and you can support yourself well. It's also when you can support your child best too. Now, there are lots of things that can tip us out of our window of tolerance, and that can lead us to either become hyper-aroused when our arousal levels go up, or hyper-aroused when our arousal levels go extremely down. When we're hyper-aroused, we'll feel more hyper-vigilant. That's when our fight or flight response kicks in. We might also feel tired, and those feelings of guilt, irritability and frustration might also kick in. When we're hypo-aroused, that's when we're more likely to shut down. We might feel numb, passive, withdrawn. Some people describe feeling quite frozen, and they also get those feelings of shame and guilt. What's really important to highlight is when we go out of our window of tolerance, the thinking part of our brain switches off. Now, one of the biggest things that brings us out of our window of tolerance is situations where we feel threat. As a parent and carer, having a child who's experiencing mental health difficulties can feel like a very big threat, and so parents might be more likely to tip out of their window of tolerance more regularly. Before going to strategies that can help you to stay within your window of tolerance and regulate your window of tolerance, I want to acknowledge the basics, because the basics are really important to be able to help you to think about how you can use these strategies. When I talk about the basics, what I mean is supporting your basic needs. That includes eating, sleeping, taking the medication that you need. They're all really fundamental to help you to better support yourself as well as someone else. The basics also include finding time for small breaks and space to reflect, as well as small moments for self-care. It's got to be really simple. The basics also include problem solving, focusing on what you can control rather than being able to only focus on what you can't, as well as opportunity to pace where possible throughout your day. One analogy that can be really helpful when thinking about pacing is the spoon analogy. The idea of the spoon analogy is that you only have so many spoons in your day, and once you've used up your spoons, you're more likely to tip out of your window of tolerance. If you've had a particularly tricky morning where your child has been really struggling with their mental health, or other things have been going on in your morning, you already have used up quite a lot of your spoons, which means you have far less spoons to go through your day, and just recognising that can be really helpful. Meeting these basic needs is really important, but we know they're really difficult. So I guess the final thing to acknowledge is that if you're currently unable to meet those basic needs, it's also really important to be kind to yourself if you can't do these things. Later on in this workshop, we're going to be thinking about this concept of being kind and compassionate to yourself more, but we want to acknowledge it now, as it is really hard to use the rest of the strategies we're going to talk about if you can't meet your basic needs. If you are listening to this now and you recognise that it's really hard at the moment to meet your basic needs, I'd encourage you to watch a range of additional videos on our website that go into all these concepts of prioritising small moments, problem solving and pacing in further details to help you think how you can meet your basic needs before implementing the strategies that we will be talking about today. So the first strategy we're going to be talking about is stop. Stop refers to stop, take a breath, observe and practice what works. The stop strategy is a really helpful strategy that can be very simple in helping you to regulate yourself and come back to your window of tolerance when you either flip your lid or your stress cup overflows. So the first part of stop is to stop. Stop what you're doing, stay calm and step away if needed. Now this might only be appropriate if it's safe to do so. There are times when you might be with your child and it's not appropriate or safe for you to step away from them. In those moments when you can't physically step away, what we're asking you to do is just stop and take a moment to pause. It's really that simple. Once you've stopped, it's time to take a breath. Why don't you take a breath with me now? Breathe in and breathe out. When we're out of our window of tolerance, we can sometimes forget to breathe. Breathing and grounding ourselves are an amazing and quick way that overrides the body's stress response and brings the rational part of the thinking brain back online. It's a really quick way that helps to regulate that central nervous response and connect to the brain. Some of you may have jumped into cold water before and had that initial gasp of air. That's that very same principle in action. There are lots of different breathing strategies that can be really useful for you in the moment when you need to stop and take a breath. Some people really like to focus on their breath, really noticing the breathing in and the exhaling as it leaves your body, really focusing on your stomach expanding and going in. Some people find that really stressful, so actually focusing on their breath can increase that breathing more. In those instances, there's lots of other really helpful breathing strategies that you can use. You can focus on a square. We call this box breathing or square breathing, where you look at a square in the room and you follow it, focusing on breathing in for 4, holding for 4, breathing out for 4, and holding for 4. Another strategy is colour breathing. Colour breathing is the concept that you think of a calm colour and a colour that's stressful for you too. Imagine that calm colour filling your body as you breathe in, and imagine that stressful colour leaving your body as you breathe out. It's really simple but can be really effective. Other strategies other than breathing can be focusing on your senses, and a great simple strategy that lots of people find really helpful is the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. And that's about focusing on 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste, and 1 deep breath. Really simple, but can be really helpful and can be used wherever you are. The final part of stop is about observing and practicing what works. Observe how you are feeling. How stressed are you? How high in your stress cup are you? It's also really important to notice and observe your thinking habits. Are you self-critical? Are you catastrophizing? It can be really helpful to think about how accurate these thoughts are and think about whether there's alternative, helpful thoughts that you can use in the moment. It can be really also helpful to think about observing your body sensations. Are you holding tension in your body? Are you holding your breath? Often when we're stressed and going out of our window of tolerance, we tend to hold our breath more, and this can actually lead to more tension that in turn makes us more stressed and builds our stress cup. Noticing how our body is can help us to make adaptations to respond and relax ourselves in the moment. It's also important to acknowledge the ways that we might cope when we're feeling stressed. Are these helpful ways of coping with stress? Are they less helpful? It's also really helpful to notice what your triggers are. Think about it. What are the triggers that increase your stress cup? Once you notice whether your ways of coping and your triggers are helpful or unhelpful, it might allow you to think about a bit more about what might help and encourage you to practice what works to bring down that stress cup in the moment. Again, we have additional videos on all these concepts that will go into more depth to help you think about how you can think differently in more helpful ways, adjust to those body sensations and think of alternative, more helpful ways of coping with stress. The next strategy is all around self-soothing, and this is all about bringing and keeping your stress cup down. With our window of tolerance, we have 3 systems that are often working together. We have our threat system, our drive system, and our soothe system. Our drive system and our soothe system allow us to help regulate that threat response. However, when we experience significant threats for prolonged periods of time, we tend to activate our drive system more, and our soothe system tends to get smaller. Often, when a parent and carer has experienced their child with mental health difficulties for a long period of time, they're in a prolonged state of threat. And what that can mean is that their self-soothe system becomes a lot smaller. Parents and carers therefore need to take the time to really proactively kind of cultivate self-soothing so that it can make their self-soothe system bigger. And this helps them to more effectively respond to states of threat so they don't quite easily get out of their window of tolerance. Here are some activities that can help you to think about how you can cultivate your self-soothe system. When we think about those activities, we're thinking about activities that use your 5 senses. They might also be activities that you enjoy, or activities that give you a sense of achievement. These might be values in line with being a parent, but also your personal values as well. Mindful activities can also be really useful activities that help you to self-soothe by helping to be really present in the moment in a non-judgmental way. Activities where you connect with others can be really also helpful when thinking about self-soothing, as well as small pleasures that help you distract, refocus, and help you reframe. Other activities that research has shown can be really helpful in increasing that self-soothe system is around activities that enhance a sense of gratitude. I'd like you now to pause this video and think about some activities that in the past might have helped you to self-soothe, or ones that you're currently engaging in that can also be really useful. If you're struggling to think about this, it might be helpful to think about some friends and family that you know who engage in activities that they find really useful. You might find it helpful to write these things down. I'll see you in a minute. Hopefully you've had time to think about some activities that you could do to help you self-soothe. We've had lots of different examples from parents and carers of things that they do to self-soothe. Some describe going for a walk and being in nature as really self-soothing. Others find listening to a podcast or music really useful, playing with Lego, or even cleaning as something that's quite a self-soothing activity. If you're struggling to think about things that could be useful, we have a video all around self-soothing that can give you a range of ideas. You can visit our parent carer manual and the section on self-soothing to link you to further ideas on this. Here are my top tips to help you self-soothe as a parent, as it can be really tricky. My first tip is be realistic. It's got to be something that you can really realistically fit in your day-to-day. There can be lots of things that could be really useful to self-soothe, but you might not have the time in day-to-day life to be able to do them. So it's really important to make them small and make adaptations as well if needed to make it more accessible for you to engage in. I'd encourage you as well to think about how you can fit them into what you're already doing. Consider how you can prioritise these and also persevere with it. It's very likely the first time you choose to do this, you might not be able to do it. It's really important you consider how you can prioritise this and persevere with this. The first time you try to do a self-soothe activity, it's very likely that it'll be quite hard to do, so that perseverance is really key. If you keep persevering and it's really hard to make time for this, we'd encourage you to really ask others to help you to be able to have this time for yourself and prioritise it. Another useful activity can be to develop your own coping and self-soothe box that can be to hand when you need to remind yourself to self-soothe. You can put lots of different things in there that remind you how to self-soothe in the moment, so you don't have to think about it when your thinking part of your brain switches off. So the final skill is all around self-compassion, and this is all about showing empathy and kindness to yourself. So when thinking about self-compassion, it's really important to recognise how certain elements of how we think and how we feel can impact our stress cup. So feelings of shame, self-doubt, guilt and anger can all lead to certain thoughts that actually increase our stress cup. Feelings of shame can often lead to parents having thoughts of, others will judge me, I'm not good enough. Feelings of self-doubt might then lead to thoughts of, I can't do this, while guilt might lead to thoughts, it's my fault, I should be doing better, I should be doing more. Finally, emotions of anger could also lead to thoughts of, why us? It's just not fair. Although those thoughts and feelings are really normal for parents and carers, what we can find is actually it increases that stress cup, and it might actually lead to that stress cup overspilling. So it might not be the external things that trigger us to tip out of our window of tolerance, but the internal dialogue and feelings that are going on inside. That's where self-compassion is really key, in being able to bring that stress cup down to prevent us flipping our lid. Self-compassion can feel quite an unusual skill for parents and carers, and quite unnatural to their day-to-day. However, it's a really important skill to cultivate. Here are my top tips to start thinking about how you can use self-compassion day to day. Number 1, notice critical thoughts and self-doubt. The first step to being able to kind of challenge those thoughts is acknowledging them. So it's really important we just notice those thoughts coming in. It's then important to acknowledge what you can't change and how you feel about it. Often parents and carers describe trying to really push away from what can't be changed. However, actually, it's really important to take the time to pause and acknowledge how hard it can be. You should also focus on your strengths and the small wins. Being a parent and carer when you're supporting a child with mental health difficulties can really knock self-confidence, and it can be really easy to focus on what's not going well rather than the small things that you're doing really well to support your child and yourself. So it's really important to focus on those small strengths and notice when you are doing good enough. Being kinder to yourself where possible is also really important. Some ways you can do that is just acknowledge when it's hard to meet your basic needs. You might say, "It's been hard to meet my basic needs at the moment, so I might get things wrong." You might also acknowledge that it's okay to get things wrong. You can always take a step back and repair difficulties with your child when you're calm. Another great question to ask yourself is, what would you say to your child or your friend? Often parents and carers are really good at giving advice to others or their children, and sometimes it's really helpful to ask yourself that question to get a bit of perspective from the situation. Sometimes as well, when thinking about self-compassion, parents and carers say it's really important to give themselves permission to allow themselves to be sad. Putting your hand to your heart and stopping and acknowledging that is a really helpful, quick and simple practice where you can do that. Acknowledging how you feel and noticing that something is making you feel sad, hurt or frustrated in the moment. My final 2 top tips is about setting realistic goals, focusing on hope and the future. In the moment, when things feel really hard, it can really easily feel like things are stuck. But it's really important to think future-focused when things can feel better and things that you can control rather than things you can't. Finally, self-compassion might involve acknowledging when things are really hard for yourself and you might need professional help. It's okay to notice when things are above and beyond manageable and you might need some support to help with your mental health at present. Again, there are lots of great apps and resources that can help you with this, which I'll touch on at the end. You can use the QR code here though to also go to a video that shows you some self-compassion practices in the moment that you can use. Why not have a look? So I've introduced you to 3 skills that you can use that are short and simple to support your own well-being. Sometimes as well, the best way of supporting your well-being is thinking about how you can look after yourself, but also how you can use these strategies with your child. I want to end by touching on some points about how you can support yourself and them at the same time. The first step is around supporting your basic needs together. Sometimes as parents or carers, it can be a lot easier to prioritise your own basic needs when you're prioritising your child's. Often you might be very good at making sure you meet their basic needs, but it's harder to meet your own. Why not give it a go together? Think about how you can eat at the same time they eat, or focus on the small things that you need to do, like pacing and setting small times to pause and reflect. Remember your basic parenting skills as well, and pace to make yourself and your child feel safe. PACE stands for playfulness, acceptance, curiosity and empathy. Often when your child is struggling, it can feel really hard to be able to use these parenting skills, but it's really important to think about when you can naturally find moments for playfulness and curiosity and just sitting alongside your child when they're struggling. You don't always have to have the answers. It's really important as well to still set clear boundaries and untangle yourself from your child. Sometimes it can be really hard to tell when it's your feelings versus when you're feeling your child's feelings. At the end, I'm going to introduce you to a book that is really useful with a really helpful chapter that thinks more around untangling yourself. I'd encourage you to have a bit of a read. Finally, mending difficulties when things are calm can be really important. Sometimes when things are heightened, there can be a lot of pressure for parents to feel like they need to mend things in the moment. It's really okay when you are feeling dysregulated and your child is to step away and try to mend things when you both feel a bit calmer. My final few tips for how you can support yourself and your child at the same time is thinking about how you can problem solve difficulties together. Taking that pressure off that you have to know the answer You can identify, ask, explore and learn together. Again, we have a whole video all about problem solving and how you can use this skill yourself but also with your child to work through the challenges that they're going through. Some parents also tell us that it can be really helpful to set family goals, to celebrate the small successes and strengths, not just of any of your child but also your own. As a family, you can all be on the lookout for strengths and successes together to encourage and spur one another on. It's also really important to set aside problem-free time together. Often when your child is experiencing mental health difficulties, there can be a lot of time spent focusing on the problem. And so it's really important that you have time set aside together to focus on things away from the problem and things in day-to-day life and normalise that. Again, all these strategies can work for you both and your child, so you can actually model them to your child and practice them together. It's a great way that they can also learn to look after themselves too. That was a whistle-stop tour into starting to think about how you can look after yourself to look after your child. I really hope you found this workshop helpful. The key things I hope you remember when you go away is looking after a child with mental health difficulties can be hard. Remember, stop, self-soothe and be kind to yourself. You are not alone and it's really okay to ask for help if you're struggling. Please don't forget the parenting skills you have. And I really hope you'll take away that looking after yourself is important when looking after your child. I want to end by touching on some really useful resources that will go into some of the strategies and themes that I've talked about today in further depth. The first is the book How to Cope When Your Child Can't. It's a really helpful book that goes into lots of the strategies we talked about in further depth and gives real life examples from parents and lived experiences of how they've used the strategies in practice to support themselves and to support their child. We've also developed in Hampshire CAMHS a parent and carer manual. It's called the Good Mental Health Handbook. And the first section is a guide for parents and carers on a range of mental health topics of how you can support your child with what they're struggling with. It covers a range of topics that your child might be struggling with, including ADHD, anxiety, low mood and other mental health difficulties. And hopefully will provide a bit of direction and signposting for further resources you might find useful. The second half really focuses on how you can look after yourself to look after your child and covers all the themes we've talked about today and skills in further depth. You can use the QR code to take you straight to our Parent Carer Manual on our website. Finally, I just want to end with acknowledge some really useful apps that our parents and carers have shared that they find useful. Some are paid and some are free. Our favourites include Headspace, which has some really helpful mindfulness strategies that you as adults can use. Bloom is also a paid app that has some really helpful sections on self-compassion and empathy. Finally, WhatsApp, the mental health app, is a really useful app that gives you quick and easy strategies that you can use in the moment when you're feeling dysregulated to kind of bring your window of tolerance back online. Please don't forget to go to our Hampshire CAMHS website, which has much further information on all these topics. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you found it useful. Please remember to look after yourselves and take care.